Coming up, Georgia faces a tough decision involving one of the top high school prospects in the country, and Dan Mullen makes a pretty interesting comparison. We'll talk about it all next, right here on SEC Country Live. Hello everyone and welcome to SEC Country Live. My name is Brandon Adams. This is Mike Johnson, former Alabama All-American. We're glad you're with us here on this program. A lot of spring practice is beginning this week around the SEC. We're talking about a lot of that and other stuff going on as well. You know, it doesn't exactly feel like spring outside of our studio right now. It was warm yesterday, not really today, but you give me a little spring football and I'm ready to go.
Yeah, I mean, I actually walked to work yesterday. I don't even know how far it is. Not very far, but today is terrible outside. I'm not excited about it.
So I hope it's good where you are, and if it's not, just settle in, watch a little SEC talk here for the next 60 minutes. We'll look forward to your comments both on the YouTube side of things. We've gotten pretty good about accessing that each and every day, and on Facebook here as well on the Facebook Live comment section. We'll talk to you, and don't forget there's a podcast that'll be posted at the end of the show. For now, though, let's dive into the big news. We call it our SEC Country Live First and 10 list. And item number one on our list is the possibility, anyway, that in the battle of quarterbacks at Georgia between Jake Fromm and Justin Fields, that the end result might end up being Justin Fields redshirting. This came up because of Yogi Roth, the quarterback analyst who works with the Elite 11, and one of those guys you see sort of pop up on the radio and TV all the time talking about quarterbacks. He was quoted by our buddy Barrett Salee over at CBSSports.com in terms of how he thinks that the Fromm-Fields competition might go down. And, well, if it ends up being a redshirt scenario for Justin Fields, according to Yogi Roth, that's not all bad. Here is what Roth was quoted by Barrett Salee at CBSSports.com as of having said. He says, giving the guys the ability to hit the pause button for a second in their careers, redshirt, sit, learn, evolve emotionally on the football front, it's huge. Jake Fromm might be in a better position had he sat last year, developed his body, and learned from Jacob Eason. I know that sounds nuts because he did so well, but he didn't have the chance to have a full year to develop his body with that program. He's unique and did compete, went on to win the national title, which is insane, but Yogi Roth there, the quarterback analyst, saying it might have been good for him to have a redshirt year. Believe it or not, despite the fact that Fields is one of the top quarterbacks in the entire country, one of the top players regardless of position for the class of 2018, in the past, when he's spoken on this subject, he's actually been almost kind of okay with the redshirt season himself. He told DogNation.com back in July, in fact, we'll show you some of the quote here of Fields talking about this, that, what he said back in July was that if you go back and you look at the study, you look at the research, this is the kind of thing that a lot of guys have done before. Right. Fields has said that he would be okay with that. He's obviously thinking about guys like Jameis Winston, Johnny Manziel, who went on to be first-round draft picks after having sat for a year at the college level. Do you think there's any chance that Justin Fields could truly end up getting redshirted at Georgia?
Well, I don't see this scenario, and you would know better than me. Obviously, you look at possibly a depth chart at Georgia right now. What does a quarterback room look like? The fact that Jacob Eason isn't there anymore. I don't know what the other alternatives are, but you look at, I mean, just think about the possibility if this had been what they tried to do with Jake Fromm last year, where this team would be sitting right now. I don't know if they're in the mode right now where it's, hey, let's, we have an embarrassment of riches in the quarterback room. Let's just redshirt the number one quarterback in the country. I don't see that scenario. I think that at some point this year, I find it highly unlikely. I don't know where the loss is going to come from. I find it highly unlikely that Georgia goes undefeated through the regular season. So if they do trip up and Jake Fromm does struggle in that game, I have to think the pressure is going to be too great to just say, hey, we're still going to redshirt that guy. He's not even going to be part of the field right now.
I don't think there's any chance really that Justin Fields redshirts. I think what he said, I referenced the quote from DogNation.com. You have to go all the way back to July to hear him talking about the possibility of, hey, I'd be okay. I think sometimes recruits are tempted to sort of say what they think they're supposed to say. I think that might be an example of that. I think the real story with Justin Fields is this is a guy who wants to compete. And in fact, in a recent interview, he talked about that very point, that he does want to be, giving the chance, given the opportunity to kind of go out there and earn what could be his, which is some playing time in his freshman season. Here's a little bit of Justin Fields, the incoming freshman at Georgia, on that very subject.
When choosing a college, you can't really worry about who's in front of you or who's played before you or anything like that. I'm not afraid to compete against anyone, so competition can only make you better. Iron sharpens iron, so my goal is just to go in there and just compete my butt off and work hard.
Now, the great thing, if you're a Georgia fan here, is it seems like there's going to be an embrace of this competition from Jake Fromm as well. The reason why we know that is last year, Fromm was in the same position then that Fields is now, battling against a 5-star quarterback, hoping for playing time. This year, Fromm may be the one that's pushed by Fields. Last year, he was the one trying to push then Georgia quarterback Jacob Eason. But at the time, Jake Fromm, much like Justin Fields, also embraced that competition. But not only because it was a chance for Fromm to earn something, but he thought it made the entire Georgia program better. Here is Jake Fromm with a Dog Nation a year ago.
Competing, it's not only making myself better, it's making him better, it's making, at the end of the day, the team better. And I just want to see Georgia football be successful. And, man, I just want to go at it, take it one step every single day and help any way I can.
By the way, I want to appreciate Shannon Burgess watching the show on both of his browsers right now.
Saw that.
He's got the YouTube and the Facebook going on. That can only help us to have people checking in on multiple sides of the show, and it is kind of fun watching people go back and forth between the two feeds during the live show when it is going on. But Fromm embraced the competition, Fields embraced the competition, and ultimately, my takeaway, and you and I talked about this on Dog Nation Daily this morning. I've said this to any Georgia fan who's wanted to talk about the subject. Ultimately, I think that Fromm is too good to lose the starting job. Georgia is, like you said, likely to lose a regular season game somewhere along the way in 2018. I don't think that Jake Fromm will be the reason why, and I don't think that Jake Fromm is going to be at a risk to lose his starting job on the basis of just a loss. But while Fromm is probably too good to lose the starting job, I think that Justin Fields is probably too good to be a redshirt. Yes, there's obviously some benefit to being a redshirt, but the truth is, in modern college football, none of us get to sort of settle down and take our time and have it easy. There's always, just in life in general, beyond college football, there's this desire to sort of accelerate every process. Quarterback talent much the same way. Would Fields benefit from the opportunity to sit and watch for a year? He might, but I don't think he's going to get that opportunity.
Who's the other quarterback on the roster at Georgia right now that would take the snaps? I mean, I'm seriously asking you, who would be the guy that would be the backup quarterback this year if it wasn't Justin Fields?
Georgia's non-scholarship walk-on scout team quarterback from a year ago was named Stetson Bennett, and while it may sort of raise some eyebrows, oh, this is a non-scholarship guy, the truth is he was really praised as a walk-on. Right. Now, some of that kind of stuff could just be puffery, but if Fields and Fromm were to both, let's say, get hurt, which is a sort of a horrible thing for Georgia fans to think about, a guy like Stetson Bennett would probably be the guy that would take the reins for Georgia. Right. Now, the honest truth is they'd probably put McCole Hardman or something like that in a Wildcat. But,
right.
But the third quarterback at Georgia is a guy like Bennett who did have scholarship offers to other schools and just chose to be on the Georgia roster instead.
And the reason I ask that is because going into last season, Bama was faced with a very similar scenario where you had a guy in Jalen Hurts who obviously had just taken Bama to a national title game, had gone undefeated in his starts the year before. And you sit there and look at Tua Tagovailoa, who has a bright future, and think, man, if we just redshirt these guys and separate these guys a little bit, we might get the best of both worlds. There wasn't anybody else really on the roster. Mac Jones obviously sitting back there. He's a guy who needed time to develop if he was going to be an efficient passer at this level right now looking forward. And so I think that Georgia's faced with a lot of the same things. But you go into camp practices, go into some of these fall camp practices and some of these scrimmages and say, okay, if we're going to redshirt Justin Fields, tell me who else out here can be a contributor were something to happen to Jake Fromm. You don't want to go late into the season and say, well, we could have used him all year. He could have been developing on the field, but now we've got to throw him into the fire. I don't know if that roster is ready for that scenario.
Vince Blank in the comment section says, what team do you see Jake Fromm transferring to next year? That's obviously a little bit of a jab at this situation. The truth is, I don't think there's a whole lot of concern about either of these two quarterbacks transferring right now. I think they're different enough that they both bring something different to the table. Fromm is, not really a dual threat guy, although he ran some. Fields is a great thrower, at least coming out of high school, but he's got the dynamic with his legs that Fromm doesn't have. These two guys are different enough that there's probably room for them both to play. Here's the other thing. I mean, if Georgia's a top 5 team playing as a point spread favorite in all but one regular season game, there could be big enough leads where it's not a question of, how do you find Fields some playing time? He may get playing time just in the virtue of the fact that Georgia's just leading him by a lot.
I would say that that's more of the scenario you're going to see as opposed. And obviously, you want a guy of that talent level to be a part of the game plan, to really be able to utilize his talents to the best of his ability, put him in good situations, be able to put him in on meaningful snaps, but I think you're going to see, and that's exactly what happened at Bama last year, where you get up by 60 points against Vanderbilt, and all of a sudden Tua's doing 360s and throwing touchdowns in the back of the end zone. I think that, in my opinion, if I was looking at a crystal ball, that is how Georgia fans will be introduced to Justin Fields this year.
Greg Steele says if Fields redshirts, they're just postponing the inevitable transfer of one of them. I truly don't think there's a whole lot of concern. Now, we also are in a day and age where quarterbacks either play right away, play well, or move on somewhere else. We're definitely in a lot more of a commoditized relationship between team and quarterback than we've had before. But for Georgia right now, I don't think that they're that worried about all of that. We can talk more about this in the comment section, both on YouTube and on Facebook Live. For now, though, let's move on to another quarterback topic. Item number 2 here on our SEC Country Live First and 10 list. And Dan Mullen, as I said before, a lot of coaches in the SEC don't do this kind of stuff anymore, but Mullen seems intent to meet as many Florida fans as he can, shake as many hands as he can. One of our SEC Country colleagues on hand last night at the Tampa Yacht Club as Dan Mullen was introduced to speak to some Gator supporters there. Here is the scene, what that looked like.
And so I know all this because I'm the PR guy that has to do stuff like this for a living. And one of the questions I get asked all the time, because I am the PR guy, is when Dan Mullen came off the plane when we landed in Gainesville, did I tell him to do the Gator Chomp? Did I tell him to do the Gator Chomp? And I tell people, no, because Dan Mullen is all Gator. Ladies and gentlemen, your head coach of the Florida Gators, Dan Mullen.
So there is Dan Mullen there meeting the fans. You heard Steve McClain, the Florida PR guy, saying didn't have to tell Mullen to do the Gator Chomp when he got off that plane there that day. He was all ready to do that on his own. That was something that he was all about there, kind of showing himself to be all Gator. Of course, Michael Clyburn, a Mississippi State fan, says Mullen's just trying to pump the media to create some positive buzz. But listen, that's what stuff like this is. You kind of go to these places, you create the buzz. Now, at the event in Tampa last night, he was asked the question about, Felipe Franks, and, could Franks be the quarterback for Florida this season? Is it the kind of thing that Gators fans ought to have some concern about? In the midst of talking up Felipe Franks, Dan Mullen went on to make a comparison that at least raises an eyebrow for me. He says, I watched Felipe Franks throw the ball 75 yards against Tennessee. The last quarterback I saw that could throw the ball that far was Cam Newton. The last quarterback I coached that had that kind of arm talent was Cam Newton. So Dan Mullen here. Now, this may be the kind of thing you do. You sort of let yourself go a little bit in sort of a not really a press conference environment. But the Felipe Franks, Cam Newton comparison, where does that land with you?
I think it's something he has to say. I think anytime you're trying to
say that.
Well, I think anytime you're trying to get a fan base riled up and really excited about the year they have ahead of them, you can't go out there and say, well, Emory Jones, this and that, Emory Jones, this and that. You got to point to the guy there. And listen, there was a statement in there, and it wasn't on the screen right now, but he said, I'm not big on pre-existing judgment. And I think that's a big thing for first-year head coaches to kind of take in. You don't want to listen, you don't want to go ahead and jump into a situation and take the pulse of the fan base and just say, boy, they really know what they're talking about. Emory Jones has to play this year. And I think that there's going to be different scenarios, and a lot of Florida fans don't think Felipe Franks was great last year. They don't, they look at it, man, what do you have? 9 touchdowns, I think 8 interceptions, 1,300 passing yards, something along those lines. They don't jump off the paper at you, but what quarterback before him really jumped off at the paper at you? And so I think Dan Mullen is right to really reserve judgment till he gets to see Felipe Franks in his own design system.
But hold on. The one thing I can't let go here, though, is there is a big chasm in between talking up Franks as the favorite over Emory Jones and saying, the last quarterback I saw do the things that Felipe Franks can do, that's Cam Newton.
No.
That's a huge gap.
Arm talent being the key word. Well-selected verbiage by Dan Mullen. He says, I haven't had a quarterback since Cam Newton that had the arm talent Felipe Franks did. Well, of course. I mean, look at, there's not many people ever have the arm talent that Felipe Franks and Cam Newton did. That's the only comparison you'll ever make between Felipe Franks and Cam Newton, though, right?
Yeah, I guess so. I think, though, a couple things here. I think there should be a category of SEC player that we don't make any comparisons to unless it's like a real legitimate comparison. Cam Newton, listen, I'm no Auburn fan. Frankly, I'm not a Cam Newton fan. I mean, there's some specific things about Newton that I don't always love, but he was a special talent when he was at Auburn. He was a real unique player. I think, this is like the second time in the last few weeks, we've had the Cam Newton comparison. You had Gus Malzahn saying, Joey Gatewood reminds me of Cam Newton. I mean, you can't be as good as Cam Newton and have two different quarterbacks in the SEC that currently reminds you of Cam Newton, neither one of which, by the way, have proven to be anything worth, this kind of comparison. I feel like we need to put the Cam Newton comparison probably on the shelf a little bit.
Well, listen, I mean, see, you're taking it one step too far. All these guys are saying is, boy, this guy is athletic like Cam Newton. It doesn't mean he's athletic
Gus
as Cam
Malzahn's,
Newton.
I mean, I wish we had the quote. I'd pull it back up. Gus Malzahn said this guy looks like Cam Newton.
It looks like Cam Newton, and it is as good as Cam Newton are totally different things. The minute I see him come out and say, boy, he's as good as Cam Newton, then I'll be like, dude, slap yourself in the face. That guy's,
right.
Let's not put him on that shelf. But to come out and say, this guy plays in the style of Johnny Manziel, or this guy kind of reminds me of Dak Prescott. I don't mind coaches doing that. People just jump all over those statements and say, boy, that's high praise. He's just saying that's kind of along the lines of the type of player they are.
I want to get some comments on this in a moment, but let me make one more point, and people are going to hate me for saying this. But the other thing here is, what a humble brag is? This sort of feels like sort of a kind of a low-key humble brag about, hey, I coached Dan Mullen in college for like 5 minutes. But doesn't that sort of highlight part of Florida's past they probably don't want to remember, that they did have Newton and sort of he had to leave for kind of circumstances?
No, I don't think they should erase it. I mean, listen, if you're Dan Mullen, you're talking about quarterback rooms. It was the same conversation we had yesterday about Tim Brewster and Jalen Ramsey.
Right.
Kind of pointing to guys from the past. The fact is, Dan Mullen was a quarterback coach in a quarterback room that had 2 Heisman Trophy winners. I think you highlight.
But he didn't make Cam. I mean, come on, he didn't make Cam Newton a Heisman
But he recruited him. He got him on. He got him on campus. He recruited him. He at least had a little bit of part in developing the guy. And I think there's something to be said for that.
All right,
I wouldn't. If I was a Florida fan, I wouldn't want to erase Cam Newton out of my history.
All right, let's get some comments on this. Starting with Jamie Bailey, a Georgia fan, who says Franks was great year last year. So Jamie Bailey wants to see more of Felipe Franks, I guess. Wayne Folan kind of agrees the same thing there. Another Georgia fan kind of weighing in on that. Shannon Burgess says it's a huge stretch in that comparison, and that's my point. I'm mostly having fun with this. I mean, I'm not going to give Dan Mullen a hard time, but I do think that we can all probably come up with like a list of like 4 or 5 guys and there may be like 1 per school, but don't make any Cam Newton comparisons unless you have a running, throwing quarterback on the doorstep of winning the Heisman Trophy. In the SEC, he's not Cam Newton. Yeah. He doesn't have the arm talent of Cam Newton. He doesn't look like Cam Newton.
Nobody looks like Cam Newton.
Yeah, unless you're Cam Newton, you're not. People say that, so and so want to make him a tight end. The truth is, he looks like a tight end who was just a really, really good quarterback. That's a tough comparison to make with anybody. I think Tim Tebow's in that group. I think you'd say the same thing about Herschel Walker. You might one day say the same thing about Minka Fitzpatrick. I mean, there's a small handful of SEC guys of maybe we don't do any comparisons unless the comparison is sort of universally agreed to be obvious.
And that's fine with me too. I think Baker Mayfield's been talked about along the lines of Johnny Manziel. I think they're both Heisman Trophy winners. I'm okay with comparing them. The fact is this though.
But they're also both dunces too. That's the reason why you go and compare those two.
I know you don't like either one of them. When you talk about the combination of arm strength and size of Cam Newton and his ability to play quarterback, I don't know that we'll ever see anybody approach level. I didn't play against Cam Newton in college. I was gone by the time he got to Auburn. Mm-hmm. But I saw him play for the Panthers. Let me tell you right now, Matt Ryan looked like he was Cam Newton's son when they stood next to each other. That is the biggest human being I think I've ever seen. I mean, he is absolutely massive.
If you'd allow me to make a prediction, I don't believe you'll ever see Felipe Franks playing for the Panthers.
No, I don't think so either.
As it stands right now, I don't quite think that's in his future. Dustin Mule says, I'm a Gator fan, not overlooking them. We have work to do. We ain't recruiting the top 5 to compete for a championship. So that's Dustin Mule kind of responding to another Florida fan who was talking about he likes the fact that Florida's getting a little bit overlooked and maybe people not paying attention to the Gators right now. Some other folks kind of weighing in on this issue. We'll continue to let folks do that. Some of these probably can't read, but nonetheless, we'll continue to take some comments here on SEC Country Live. Let me move on here to item number 3 on our SEC Country Live first and 10 list. And this is one of those sort of like nonsense topics that I absolutely love about the SEC. This is the kind of thing that, the notion that it just means more. This is an example of how it does mean more. People are worried about what's inside of the stadium several months before the stadium's actually going to be used for anything. Yeah. The best example of the angst that some Tennessee fans have about the fact that Butch Jones, the former Tennessee coach, face is still adorned to the Jumbotron there at Neyland Stadium goes back to our buddy Tony Paul, who on Twitter, in song version, kind of explained to everybody why Tennessee fans did not want to see Butch Jones' face on that big scoreboard at Neyland Stadium anymore. Here's a little bit of the song from earlier this week if you missed it.
Lord knows that I'm a Tennessee fan, but there's one thing that I don't understand. Why do we still have to keep looking at that face?
So that's kind of what he did there. You know, he wrote the song. I thought it was hilarious. I think the guy's pretty talented. But he's talking about the Butch Jones Jumbotron. There you see it on the screen right there. It's there at Neyland Stadium. It's on the back of the stadium, and this has been there. And Tennessee fans want this gone. Well, apparently good news for the VFLs. Butch Jones' face is soon to be gone. TV station in Knoxville reporting this. This is WVLT. Sources close to the situation told Local 8 News. I love that there's sources close to a situation involving a picture in the stadium. That work has been scheduled for Monday to start the process of removing the picture of ex-UT football coach Butch Jones from the Jumbotron that hangs over Neyland Stadium. Weather conditions, though, now could determine how long it's going to be before fans see the Jumbotron free of Butch Jones. So maybe some bad weather knocks. We're going to delay this process, but it is scheduled to happen. Now, you brought up a really good point. Whatever day it was we talked about this, I can't even remember anymore. That you can't have Butch Jones' face sort of looking down on you at the spring game. Yeah. But you know, the fact that we're a little bit up in arms about this and it's February it's kind of funny to me. Although I totally know where Tennessee fans are coming from.
I don't have any doubt about it. I mean, to me, you're a racist as soon as you can. I think when I looked into this, Betsy Davenport actually said 2 months ago that, hey, you know, we hired a crane, it's going to get done. Boy, that crane took a long time to get in there. And the first thing I thought of when I saw this today was, does Philip Fulmer watch SEC Country Live? Like they've been listening in on us talking about Butch Jones coming down off the Jumbotron, and all of a sudden this news flies out. And I think it's important to pay attention to. I think that, you know, listen, I don't think for 1 minute that Jeremy Pruitt cares, but I think it's important for Tennessee fans because it's like, that's in the past. Let's move on from what that was. That's the biggest thing for me.
I don't think Jeremy Pruitt cares, but how big of the picture of Philip Fulmer do you think is going to be there to replace Butch Jones here? So Jeremy Pruitt now gets to coach with the, now it's outside the stadium, but I mean, Philip Fulmer, he's dying to put himself up there.
Oh, right? There's no doubt. Yeah, and he says, you know, in the interview, I won't be putting myself up there. Well, yeah, I mean, I would hope that you didn't say, you know what, guys, you got to put a picture of me. But I commend him for not doing it.
But if somebody else were to put me up there, maybe
I'm
not
going to put myself up there. But yeah, you know, if somebody else wanted to, you know, kind of wave me off of that duty, I'd be willing to let somebody else talk to me.
And listen, like I said, I totally get this on the part of Tennessee fans, and you know, like the Butch Jones deal is just sort of a weird deal. And we talked about this yesterday in terms of his connection to Alabama. I mean, you know, was he a great coach? No, he wasn't that bad of a coach. You know, like Derek Dooley as an on-field coach is far worse than what Butch Jones was. Far, far worse. As a Tennessee head coach, Dooley was a much bigger failure. But somehow the Butch Jones legacy, maybe it's more recent, but there's something about Butch Jones' connection to Tennessee that for most Vols fans is almost more embarrassing than Derek Dooley. You know, do you agree? Maybe I'm wrong.
No, I think you're right.
Can tell me, but do you understand where I'm coming from?
I think you're right, and I think it goes back to one of the topics we had yesterday was about how goofy Butch Jones is and how he's almost just an easy target. And listen, when you string together the last 3 coaches they've had at Tennessee, there are some situations there where you say, boy, which one do you want to pick on? I mean, you go all the way back to Lane Kiffin, that 1-year stint, and him leaving in the middle of the night. Derek Dooley wearing the orange pants on the sideline, and Butch Jones having the, you know, the kind of Gomer Pyle thing going on. It's just, I just think Tennessee fans are ready, and Tennessee fans can tell me if I'm wrong, I think they're ready to be taken seriously again on an SEC and a national level. And I think getting Butch Jones' picture off the Jumbotron is almost step 1 or step 2 in the right direction.
Esteban Estevez says RIP to Butch Jones' picture. Jeremy Pettis says Butch Jones to Bama as a water boy analyst. And you also brought this up yesterday. It's a good point that process had been a little slow for some people. The fact that he's now maybe going to work at Alabama on the staff in any capacity, all of a sudden now there's a little bit more motivation maybe to get this thing done. Maybe.
Yeah, Tyler Mann actually was who brought that up yesterday in the YouTube comment section. That listen, you know, you want to see something happen quickly. Mention the fact that, you know, he might be going down to Alabama and that thing will be off tomorrow. Well, here we are tomorrow, and you know, we're talking about the thing coming down possibly Monday.
Christavier Stoney Williams says Butch Jones would have been happy to have a middle school offer coaching. The truth is, that's almost kind of what he came across as a coach, almost a little bit more of a guy that was just more comfortable at a lower level other than the SEC. The fact of the matter is, he says middle school, I'll also say like middle tier college program. If he were to go back to some, you know, MAC school or something like that, I think he'd be happy as a lark. I think they'd probably be happy to have him.
No, I agree, and I wonder if he gets that reputation because he almost does. He looks like a gym teacher. I mean, he looks like your typical high school like gym coach that wears, you know, tall white socks and like some kind of Nike sneakers, and he's going to go for a run before school starts.
All right, let me ask you a question. This is kind of off the subject. Like, this is like another day this week where I'm sort of like offended by the comment section.
Oh man!
But this one comes up a lot. I want your honest feedback on this. I actually want everybody to sort of weigh in on this, if you don't mind. Logan Westerman says that I look sauced. Like, why do I give off a drunk vibe? Like, people have said that before to me on the Dog Nation show. B, are you drunk right now? No, maybe I just say like dumb things. But do I look flushed? Do I have like glassy eyes? Like what about me makes me look drunk?
I don't know, man. I don't know. I don't think he looks drunk at all. But I mean, that's not the first time I've ever seen that comment.
It comes up from time to time. Let me tell you something. I wish I was. I'd love nothing more to be a little bit more relaxed.
Somebody else mentioned some of that Dixie vodka. They're probably, you know.
Yeah, listen, I love my friends over at Dixie Vodka. I can promise you that.
Davey Bailey says rosy cheeks.
That's because I'd give anything if that was the reason my cheeks are rosy.
Dave Wallace says it's the Georgia shirt that makes you look drunk.
Well, listen, you know, I can't do anything about that. I think it's also probably, come to find out, like, you don't really see anybody on TV ever wear this bright of a red. There may be a reason why this bright of a red doesn't make its way to TV quite as much, because it probably does a little something to the complexion, probably.
Yeah, listen.
So thanks. I'm going to put Logan Westerman and, who was it, Trey Dukes of the day. You know, if you cut me, I will bleed. I mean, some of y'all say some pretty hurtful things. But it is weird. I hear B, are you drunk? I mean, maybe I just say some things that make it sound like I'm drunk, or but I am not. Although
Shannon Burgess wonders if you have squinty eyes right now. Maybe that's what gives the look off.
Maybe so. It's also these lights. We got new lights the other day.
Yes.
I wish I could tell you how bright these lights are. First of all, my complexion does not need lights as bright as this. So that may also have a little something to do with it as well. Nonetheless, let's move on to item number 4 here on our SEC Country Live First and 10 list, and talk about a subject that we've dealt with before: the idea of who would follow Nick Saban in Alabama. And the thought that a lot of Alabama fans have had, the thought that analysts around the country have had is, well, because of Dabo Swinney's connection to Alabama, he, after all, did play there. He's sort of the perfect person to follow in Nick Saban's footsteps. He'd be beloved by Tide fans. He'd be a good enough coach to kind of deal with the huge expectations. And when we saw Dabo pop up at Tuscaloosa for, was it a game back in November?
Yeah, 25th anniversary of their national title team.
It almost seemed like he might have been, at least to me, cultivating some of that kind of thought of, I mean, he knows what's going to happen. He had plenty of reasons to say, I'm busy, can't be there, but he chose to be there. Is he trying to cultivate the notion of his connection to Alabama? Well, if that was true then, maybe the opposite's true now. WNSP is a sports radio station in Mobile, Alabama. Sweeney makes an appearance on the radio station. The question of, hey, would you like to replace Nick Saban comes up, and it almost seems like he, I don't know, kind of goes out of his way to sort of dampen the expectations that he's the next Alabama coach. Here's what Sweeney had to say about this. He says, when people ask him about this question, I always smile. I understand it. That's kind of the world we live in. I live in the here and now. I stay focused on where I am. I'm incredibly happy here at Clemson. I love where I am. This is my 16th year at Clemson. It's not like I haven't dug my roots in here. It's a special, special place that we love dearly. I've had 3 or 4 opportunities to leave Clemson over the years. This is a place we still have a lot of work left to be done. The dream was to win a national championship here. We're so happy we could prove that we could do that. So that quote on its own is not that dissimilar from what people like this say all the time when the subject of another job comes up. But what's absent from there is the you never say never type talk. The thing of, hey, who knows what the future holds for anybody? I'm just trying to keep the job I have now. This sort of seems like a thing of the place that I'm coaching has sort of turned into an Alabama-like program since I've been there. 3 straight trips to college football playoff, a win against Alabama 2 seasons ago. If you only were to look at that quote right there, you get the sense that Dabo Swinney is not interested in the Alabama job. Would you think that's probably true?
This might be the crimson goggles I have on, but I actually disagree with what you're saying. I think he just said it in a different way. If you put the quote back up, let's put the quote back up, and let me point to you what in that quote I actually look at that says.
Please.
See this sentence right here down on the 3rd line? I love what. No, I'm sorry. On the 2nd line, I live in the here and now. To me,
that's fair. Okay.
To me, I live in the here and now says, well, you know what? I'm the head coach at Clemson right now. I'm going to do the best things I got to do right now at Clemson, and I love where I am, and this is my 16th year, and I've dug my roots in here. I wouldn't expect him to come out and say, boy, in the future, I'd really like to be at Alabama. I think that that's something he's not willing to say. I honestly think he does love where he's at in Clemson. I think that. You obviously have done a lot of great things there. They've become a national powerhouse. They've been incredible recruiting. Dabo has gotten that program to what Clemson never has been before. But I can't read that and just assume that he's never going to be at Alabama. Maybe this is the Alabama guy in me talking. Maybe this is the crimson goggles being put on. But I don't think I look at that and say, boy, you know, that ship has sailed. Dabo's, you know, he's set up roots.
I think you're actually bringing up a really good point. That is a phrase that I didn't pay as much attention to on that. And the truth is I didn't hear the audio on this. Sometimes the way someone speaks also kind of impacts how you think about it. I think my point here, though, is, and what I think is sort of fascinating about the Dabo, you know, replacing Saban conversation, even if we're several years away from that being something that actually takes place in the here and now, is that when this stuff first started, the Clemson job was the kind of job that you did leave. If Alabama wanted you and Clemson had you, you left Clemson to go to Alabama because it was that much of a bigger and better job than Clemson was. Kind of the same reason that Jimbo Fisher left Florida State to go to Texas A&M. It's just as Jimbo's explained, just a job with better resources than the typical ACC school is going to be able to provide. But the weird thing of the last few years is, with Dabo at the helm, the Clemson job has actually become a better job.
Yeah.
They built a huge football facility.
Yeah.
I mean, could the Alabama facilities be that much nicer than what Clemson has?
Yeah, no.
I mean, the odds are, based on some of the photos I've seen, they're probably not. You know, Clemson doesn't sign as big a recruiting class as Alabama does, but in terms of elite players, Clemson's not getting told no very much. You can recruit really well there. You know, it's almost as if the Clemson job has now become a job that's not on par with Alabama, but boy, it's a lot closer than it used to be.
And listen, if we were just talking about a difference between the Clemson job and the Alabama job, I don't even think we'd be having this conversation. The point is that Dabo's from Alabama and went to Alabama and still loves Alabama and got his coaching career started at Alabama. And so, you know, I look at, and we've mentioned this much before, because Kirby Smart is back at Georgia. He's back where he came from. He's back where, you know, he wants to be, and he's back at his alma mater. That's the only reason this even comes up in the conversation. And so, you know, and I just mentioned this on the YouTube comment section, that you never want to follow Nick Saban. You don't want to be the guy after Nick Saban. But with that being said, boy, you'd love to come in and have Nick Saban's players, would you not? Do you really want someone to come in between you? If you say, boy, I don't want to follow Nick Saban, but maybe one day. Do you want somebody else to come in between you that has 10th, 12th, and 15th ranked signing classes, and then you have to go clean up that mess?
Yeah.
I think if you're a proven coach like Dabo Swinney, you feel fine being the guy after Nick Saban. I think it's just going to come down to whether or not he wants to leave Clemson.
I think that's a really good point. I think that if you bring in sort of a placeholder coach to get to the next great one, the mess that can be made can take a really long time to clean up. Because listen, as you said, if you're putting 3 or 4, 12th, 13th, 14th, 15th, ranked recruiting classes together, you're out of the national championship business. And you're probably out of the national championship business for a decade.
Yeah.
I mean, it takes about that long to sort of refill a roster with the kind of 4- and 5-star
That's how
players.
long it took. That's how long it took Dabo at Clemson. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, his first year was 2009 as a full-time head coach. It took him a while to get going.
And if you are a coach like I believe Swinney is, certainly a really good recruiter and a guy that's proven himself to be really good on the field. Now, the question is, what does he do when he doesn't have Deshaun Watson at quarterback? I guess there's still some, lingering doubt out there about that. But there's always going to be some doubt about the person that you hire to replace Saban. But if you're as good as Dabo is, if you have the demeanor that Dabo is, you're probably not scared off of being the Saban replacement, and you're probably maybe uniquely equipped to even be able to handle it.
Listen, now this is a complete pipe dream, and I'm not saying this is what's going to happen. I'm not even projecting it, but there's a scenario, built up in Alabama fans' heads where you look at it and say, okay, 4 years from now, Nick Saban turns 70. Maybe he gets to 70 and decides, I don't want to coach anymore. Maybe I'm going to be an administrator. Can you imagine Dabo Swinney as a head coach and Nick Saban as an athletic director? Mm-hmm. I mean, that would be like one of the greatest leaderships I've ever seen in a football program. So I think having Nick Saban as an AD might be willing to lure more coaches to come that direction.
Greg Steele also brings up a good point when it comes to coaches doing predictable or unpredictable things. If you go back before 2010, he says Florida thought Urban Meyer would never leave, and that's so true. I mean, when Meyer had Florida cooking, that was a job that you never left Florida because you're getting the number one classes, you're winning national championships. Florida was one of the 2 or 3 best jobs in the entire country. It may have been the number one job in the entire country, but it wasn't any worse than the top 3, and Meyer left there. He apparently didn't want to be there anymore. He sort of took a year off and then showed up at Ohio State. So if Meyer can leave a place like Florida, then Dabo Swinney, even if it's an unconventional choice, can still leave a place like Clemson.
Yeah, I completely agree. And, I don't think anybody's going to know the answer to this. It's one of those things, when is Nick Saban going to retire? Will Dabo Swinney? I don't think so. I think that the back channels are working. I think that, obviously, and it's not just Dabo Swinney at Clemson, by the way. There is anybody who knows Todd Bates and Thad Turnipseed and some of the guys in the front office, there is a ton of Alabama guys that are over at Clemson, so I would assume they would come back with him too if that opportunity ever came up for Dabo.
Wait, Thad Turnipseed's a real person's name?
Yeah, Thad Turnipseed. A lot of Alabama fans know Thad.
There you go.
He was invited as soon as Dabo got that job to go be a part of that program. So he's somebody a lot of people know. and they still have a ton of connections. I don't know if it would happen. I don't even project that it would. I personally, if I'm Dabo, I'm probably staying at Clemson.
I mean, can you imagine if a person from New Hampshire is watching this show right now and like, yeah, Alabama's going to bring back Dabo and turnip seed?
Thad and Dabo, and yeah.
That is actually pretty funny. By the way, Diedrich Frazier talking about my rosy cheek complexion. Diedrich says that my face just sort of turns red when I get worked up. If that be the case, then that's going to happen every single day because you're always getting me worked up. Everybody else
flustered on here.
Now, I'm not as much of an on-camera sweater as you are.
What?
You're a bit of a perspirer.
I'm a greasy guy, for sure.
I mean, what must your helmet have been like when you finished?
It was nasty. You put it on before.
Oh, that's right, I did. That thing was rough. By the way, Michael Cooper in the comment section, I'm not quite sure how to take this. If you're just joining us like 2 or 3 minutes ago, we were talking about some people say that I look drunk on camera. And Michael said, you don't look drunk, but you do look like a divorced uncle. What does that even mean?
I don't know. A divorced uncle.
What does that even mean?
Man, I don't know.
Let me tell you something.
You guys are rough out there.
I'm the exact whatever a divorced uncle is, that guy sounds like he's having a lot more fun on a Wednesday night than I am. I can promise this, whatever the exact opposite of a divorced uncle is, I'm a very busy father.
God.
I am not a divorced uncle.
Yeah.
I can promise that. By the way, Michael Setzer says, in terms of replacements for Alabama coach Nick Saban when he moves on, how about get your boy Lane Kiffin back? What if Kiffin made a triumph in return to Tuscaloosa?
I just don't.
Keys to the kingdom for Mr. Lane.
I don't think Coach Freshwater is going to be making any trips back to
Joey
Tuscaloosa.
Freshwater not coming back there? All right, we'll get more of your comments rolling in here on SEC Country Live, both on the YouTube side of things as well. By the way, 98 Sports Talk over on YouTube says Saban isn't leaving anytime soon anyway. I'm going to make my prediction here once again. If Saban has another class outside the, I'm going to even say top 5, if it's two non-top 5 classes in a row, no one's going to force him out. No one's going to push him out. I don't think Saban wants to deal with the pressure of Alabama fans with a roster that's no better than LSU's.
Yeah, I won't say that that's not a possibility. I definitely don't. To me, though, when I look at Nick Saban, I think, listen, he had one outside the top 5 this year and it reworked the entire program. I mean, reworked the entire coaching staff. To me, I think to an extent that gets him fired up. If I had to set the over-under, if somebody put a gun in my head and said, set the over-under on how long he's going to be there, I'm setting it at 4 years from now. I would think the over-under would have to be set at maybe, I guess you'd set it at 4.5 and say, I think I'd take the over.
All right, let me talk about Auburn here for a minute. Item number 5 on our SEC Country Live First and 10 list. First of all, the Tigers set to get going spring practice tomorrow. I'm looking forward to talking about that some on the show. But I'm also really looking forward to the 2018 season for the Auburn Tigers because as an example of why it's going to be interesting, Heather Dinich over at ESPN.com was looking at her sort of list of games that could really impact the playoff race in 2018. And on her list, it's like the entire country. 3 of the games that she mentioned involved Auburn. Auburn, Washington, Auburn, Georgia, and the Iron Bowl against Alabama at the end of the season. On a list of those, no more like 10 or 12 games, 3 of the games on her list involved Auburn. I mean, you can make a case that Auburn then is the pivotal team in the sport. Not the best team in the sport, but the pivotal sort of turning stone. I don't even know what the phrase is, but there may not be a more important team than Auburn in terms of who decides who makes the playoff than the Tigers, who go up against the Pac-12 favorite, Washington, and the 2 SEC favorites, Alabama and Georgia. Is Auburn that pivotal in your mind?
I have no doubt about it. There's not a question in my mind that Auburn is that team because let's rewind 1 year. Auburn was that team a year ago. Yep. Auburn plays Clemson on the road, the eventual ACC champions. Auburn played 3 teams last year that wound up in the college football playoff. I would be hard-pressed to think that doesn't happen again if Auburn's not one of the teams in the playoff. I think that when you look at that huge matchup they had with Georgia, that huge matchup they had with Alabama, they played 3 number 1 teams in the regular season. And that schedule kind of follows along with that this year. I think that obviously you look at those games, those 2 SEC games are going to be on the road, but Washington at a neutral site here in Atlanta, I think it very much mirrors what last year was. And if I'm looking at hindsight at last year saying those 3 games were 3 of the top games in the country, then I have not a hard time saying that this year it'll be the same way.
Chad Clark says Auburn did whoop Bama, and to borrow a phrase from Pardon My Take, people forget that. I mean, people forget that Auburn won that game because what they want to do is say, well, the game was in Jordan-Hare Stadium, Auburn's always tough at home, and it's almost completely discounted. But people go so far with that thought of Auburn's good at home, bad away from home, that's almost at this point in time now that Auburn's actually become underrated. We had the thing on the show the other day about Tom Fornelli at CBS Sports saying that Auburn was like the 2nd most hyped team this offseason. I don't see that at all. I see an Auburn team with a real opportunity that's almost not given as much credit as it deserves in terms of not just being able to impact who makes the playoff race, but to have a living, breathing shot of actually being there themselves. I'm not as high on Auburn going into this season as I was a year ago,
right,
but I still think they're a top 10 team.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And to me, listen, I point to the fact that Auburn is a lot better at home than they are on the road, and I think Gus Malzahn has done that to that team. I don't think they're. Listen, I think LSU is a great team, but Auburn should have never lost that game down in LSU.
It's a bad game. Bad game.
It wasn't only it wasn't only the fact that they lost against Clemson. It's how they looked losing against Clemson. It was a one-score game, but boy, you just never felt like Auburn was at any point close to winning that game. And final score was like 15-7 or something along those lines. It's not so much the fact that that they won those two big games at home. It's how they looked on the road last year and going away from the stadium. They got beat by a couple of touchdowns against Georgia in the SEC championship game. They went back to Mercedes-Benz Stadium and lost by UCF to a wide margin. And so I think until they win those huge marquee games against the top 10 teams away from Jordan-Hare Stadium, I think it's going to be fair to ask those questions. I think they're going to be an incredibly good team this year. I think they're going to be pivotal in the national scene. But they are going to have to do something and prove to me that they can win those games away from Jordan-Hare.
William Gunning says Auburn's got the toughest schedule in the SEC. Bam and Georgia have the easiest. I guess the thing on Georgia here is they don't have that big marquee non-conference game to start the season this year. They'll play Notre Dame again in 2019. Alabama's got Louisville added to the SEC West. Other than that, I don't know there's much of a difference between the Alabama schedule and the Auburn schedule necessarily. I guess what makes Auburn tougher is the fact that it has to play Georgia in the regular season. Alabama doesn't. But, it's certainly a tough schedule for Auburn. But these are the kinds of games that give you a chance to make the college football playoff. You got to earn your way in there somehow. And teams like Washington and Georgia and Alabama certainly give you a chance to do that. As Heather Dinich pointed out, you'd actually lose the Washington game and still be set up well because you get a chance to earn your way back in there in the back half of the schedule.
It was the same way last year, and I mentioned this on the show last year that the college football playoff has done Gus Malzahn a lot of good, in my opinion, because if you look at what their schedule was last year, losing that game to LSU, which was their second loss of the season, if that had been any other year in the BCS era, they're out of the conversation. You can't even have that conversation with them losing that second game to LSU, but that's just a game you can't lose. All of a sudden, they beat Georgia, and they beat Alabama, and they're in the SEC title game. So I think it cuts both ways, in my opinion.
Bo Molinari says, he's a Texas A&M fan, so you got to understand where this is coming from. Auburn's good on prime number dates when facing north and not at night. In other words, saying that conditions have to be just right for an Auburn win, and I understand where some of that criticism comes from. Michael Phillips, though, says Auburn played 4 games, 3 against teams in the playoff. Injuries hurt Auburn. And, I guess you can make some case about that. Kerryon Johnson was not 100% in the SEC championship game. You had Carlton Davis, who I guess did not play in the bowl game against UCF, I don't think.
Did not play.
So you did have some issue with injury there. But, let's be honest. They got handled easily by Georgia in the SEC championship. I don't know how much Kerryon Johnson's status necessarily changed that. So away from home, they still had problems, even if injuries were part of that story.
Yeah, it was. And you go back to the conversation all offseason last year was, can Gus Malzahn get over the hump and prove that he can beat Georgia and Alabama because he hadn't done it since 2013? And so then you carry over the conversation, not only to beat him, but he beat him handily. You look at the record away from home, and that's where you get the questions from.
By the way, real quickly here, Chad Clark mentions they also got beat by UCF, which they did. Do you know that here at SEC Country World headquarters, maybe tomorrow we'll find a way to put this on camera. So, I'm walking around today. Do you know that somebody's got a UCF 2017 National Championship coffee mug in this building? Have you seen it, Michael? Michael, our off-camera producer here.
Who has
have you
that?
seen the car? I don't know who it belongs to, but you've seen it though. I was just walking the aisles here today, and sure enough, there it is. Only undefeated team, black coffee mug, UCF 2017 National Champions.
We might have sacrificed that thing.
We may have to put that thing just right there.
We might have to sacrifice.
Put that thing right there in the middle. We'll see if we can find that thing and put it on camera tomorrow. Yeah. This is at SEC Country World headquarters. That's a pretty shocking thing to see here. Nonetheless, let's do item number 6 here on our SEC Country Live First and 10 list. Talk about the Tennessee Vols here for a moment, because I thought that Blake Morgan had an interesting take at SEC Country when it comes to Tennessee's 2019 recruiting efforts on the heels of what might not be a great 2018. It's the question of the day at the SEC Country Tennessee site that sort of leads this discussion. The question was something along the lines of, does Tennessee need to win games this year in order to impress recruits for December of 2018 and then February of 2019 for the 2019 class? And here's what Blake Morgan had to say about that. I think this sets us up for kind of an interesting conversation. He says a realistic win total for Tennessee would probably be around 6 or 7 this upcoming season. So without ripping through the season and coming up with some surprising wins, how can Tennessee start piling up top commitments in the class of 2019? but casting a wide recruiting net and outworking other staffs is what he says there. So I'm going to ask you the same question that Blake Morgan was asked. Do you think that Tennessee can win with the recruits without winning on the field?
I think in year one, there's no question in my mind. I mean, we've seen it happen time and time again when guys take over teams. I mean, it happened at Georgia, it happened to Alabama. It's happened places where guys take over teams that don't have a lot of talent, and you end up getting the #1 recruiting class or close to it within the next year. I think that Jeremy Pruitt has done that. I love how they talk in here about casting that wide net, because I think that's exactly what Jeremy's been doing. It's almost like, let's go out and offer everybody, see who we can get to campus, and then see who starts to stick and who we can develop those relationships with. That's exactly what he's been doing. And I think that's what you have to do in year one in Knoxville, in Tennessee. Get people on campus and see who you can land. I think eventually, eventually you're going to have to win. You're going to have to start winning games at least in year two. But I think in year one, I think he gets a pass for whatever his record is.
Yeah, so, I mean, my thought on this is one of the issues that's going to be important for Jeremy Pruitt to deal with here is the notion of demeanor. You know, you're not going to win that many games. You may be in a situation where, Tennessee has a very tough schedule. Our commenters bring this up every single day. Tennessee's dealing with an incredibly tough schedule. But along the way...
Good Lord.
Yeah, there it is. We'll show this to you in a minute. But along the way, can Pruitt, who's never been a head coach before, show the demeanor that's necessary for being a head coach? I mean, listen, he was on the hook, very close with Quay Walker, very close with Cade Mays, very close with the recruits of the 2018 class, and somehow they just sort of slipped out of his grasp. Now Mays was trending towards Georgia for a while. Quay Walker was maybe not. That was maybe a player that Tennessee had a chance to win with, but they didn't. And, I think the demeanor of a guy like Pruitt, who's never been a head coach before, I think is going to matter here.
I agree. And to me, this is not about what's a successful year, what's not a successful year, what's the number Pruitt needs to get to. I've mentioned this a bunch of times. Pruitt has to win the games Tennessee is supposed to win, and I think he'll be fine. I think recruits at it and look at it. I think it's when you start losing to to obviously Vanderbilt, losing to Kentucky, their non-conference games. I think UTEP's one of their I mean, those games have been close under Butch Jones, and so I think you have to run away with those games if you want to be taken seriously in year one as pro. I don't think you have to go out and knock off Alabama or knock off Georgia. I think you just have to win the games you're supposed to.
Plus, the odds are Jeremy Pruitt's going to run some people off too. So I mean, there's going to be a chance for more early playing time. And for a lot of recruits, that's the real thing that sells there. The chance to get on the field and play right away. I mean, Tennessee is still a big football brand. Guys want to play right away. If Pruitt can sell that, for one more class in 2019, that's going to work. But for 2020, you better show some folks some wins.
Well, listen, I think they've got enough space to where you can still have a good 2019 recruiting class and still have some needs and be like, look, you can get on the field earlier. At Tennessee right now, I think that there's still the ability to do that.
All right, let me see if I can do this. If I hold it up like this, we don't really get that great of a shot of it. Let me see if I can put it in front of Mike's face here. Can I get the close-up? Mike doesn't want to touch this thing. So there's the UCF National Champions coffee mug. Does this thing have any place at SEC Country World Headquarters? I'm a little surprised. No. A little surprised about this.
We might need to take that off the fourth floor and see if we can.
How mad would people be if I just did this thing?
No. I'll spike that thing right now.
Yeah, listen. I may be a little brazen from time to time, but I'm not brave enough to put that in front of Mike's number 17 helmet there. But we gotta put a
National
Champions coffee
SEC
mug.
Country Live audience deserves to know who in this building has had that
only 2017 undefeated champion. It says on here.
Yeah, thanks,
Alabama fans. What do you think about that? Not mine. Trust me. I don't want any part of this. I'm just all I'm doing is reporting the facts here.
Yeah. Well, we can factually throw that out the window.
All right. Let me move on to item number 7. Speaking of Alabama, here on SEC Country Live, item number 7 on our SEC Country Live first and 10 list. For the life of me, I don't know how stuff like this is supposed to work. Gordon Steele is the son of Kevin Steele, the Auburn defensive coordinator. And according to AL.com, Gordon Steele's got a new job. In fact, let me show you what Matt Zenitz, the reporter for AL.com, has reported here, that Gordon Steele is moving on to Alabama to work as an offensive analyst. He's going to be there, not in the on-field coaching role. This is a little bit similar to what we talked about with Butch Jones yesterday as an off-field analyst, but apparently he's got this job. Now, I don't think this is like a bad thing. I don't have a problem with Saban giving him a chance to work. I don't have a problem with the son of an Auburn coach working in Alabama. That's not my issue. I'm just more curious about the logistics of how this is supposed to work. I mean, Iron Bowl Saturday after Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving Day at the table, you got Kevin Steele that knows every secret of what Alabama wants to do offensively. You got Gordon Steele, is that his name? You got Gordon Steele working as the Alabama offensive analyst. He knows every secret of what's going to keep Kevin Steele employed. I mean, if you give up a bunch of points to Alabama, you could lose your job. And they're just going to sit there at Thanksgiving and not talk about the game, talk about something else. Now, this is not the first father and son to like coach against each other. In this case, it's not even really coaching against each other because Steele's not an on-field coach. But this is weirder than the coaching profession makes it out to be, right?
No, it definitely is. And you know that he's probably going through an interview. Gordon's probably going through an interview with Nick Saban, and Nick probably lowers the glasses and is like, is this something I need to worry about? Like tell me straight up. But
I almost think that. I mean, do you think that Saban's really asking that question? Because it almost seems like within the coaching profession, there's this sort of understanding.
Like professionalism.
I guess, but I don't quite see how that's supposed to work.
Yeah, I don't either. Especially when you look at the timing of the Iron Bowl, it's 2 days after Thanksgiving. I mean, it is every year, and so it is interesting to think they could be the same. I do have to tell you a quick story, though. Okay. I actually played in a high school all-star game with Gordon Steele, which was
is that right?
I don't know, 15 years ago. 13 years ago.
It's a great name, Gordon Steele.
Gordon Steele. Great name. You know what was funny about it? I knew this guy was going to be a coach at one point at the college level because coaches were not allowed at our practice, like college coaches. Kevin Steele was at Florida State at the time. Okay. College coaches were not allowed at our practice, but Kevin Steele had a son playing on the team. So guess what? He's in there. He's got Gordon next to him, and he's walking around and talking to every single recruit in the building. And he's just leveraging his son, and Gordon's following right along with him, going, "Yeah, you need to go play for my dad over there at Florida State." It was hilarious.
I mean, listen, I've worked in the media industry for a long time. What I can tell you is these kinds of secrets that apparently Gordon Steele has to keep from Kevin Steele, and Kevin Steele has to keep from his son Gordon. This would never work in the media business. No. In our industry, the industry that you're in now. People gossip every 5 seconds.
Somebody's getting thrown under the bus.
People getting thrown under the bus. I mean, just walk the halls of SEC Country Live. Not only will you find SEC Country World headquarters, not only will you find UCF coffee mugs, you're going to find somebody complaining about somebody, somebody, gossiping about somebody else. I mean, how is this supposed to not happen between coaches?
I have no idea. I cannot imagine not having. When you're a football player's son and a football coach dad, you're always talking shop anyways.
Yeah.
Talking about X's and O's. I can't imagine that they're going to be able to avoid that leading up to the Iron Bowl, but we'll see.
98 Sports Talk on YouTube says hiring Kevin Steele's son's a better idea than hiring Butch Jones' son. That's all I know. Listen, I don't think it's a bad idea to hire Steele necessarily, apart from what we were just describing. I love the fact that Saban wants to give young guys their coaching start. I don't want to relitigate yesterday's show. I still don't think hiring Butch Jones were to happen. I don't think it's a bad idea.
No, it is interesting, though. I mean, we've heard Hugh Freeze in Tuscaloosa meeting with Coach Saban. We've heard Butch Jones in Tuscaloosa meeting with Coach Saban. And the first thing that comes out about the analyst role is Gordon Steele's getting the analyst role.
Yeah, but listen, I mean, the analyst role.
There's going to be 10 of them by the end of it.
It's like Father of the Year coffee mugs. I mean, everybody in the world's going to have one of these things when it's all said and done.
No, I agree.
There's no end to the opportunity for Nick Saban to hire analysts there. Pretty funny LSU story here for item number 8 on our SEC Country Live first and 10 list. So LSU defensive back going into the NFL scouting combine, kind of paying attention to what Adidas has done in the past, which is award some folks who run the pretty good 40 times. Well, let's show you an exchange here on Twitter about one young man looking to make himself some money when it comes to an opportunity here. Dante Jackson reaches out to Adidas and says, y'all about speed, right? Adidas comes right back at him. They sense a good marketing opportunity when they see it. So on and on they go. If he can break the record, which is, 4.21, that's the lowest combine time for the 40. Adidas says they're going to hook him up with a big contract here. This is actually a pretty clever exchange between Adidas and Dante Jackson. I think both parties end up kind of looking pretty good throughout this entire process. And good for him if he can use the social medium here to make himself a little bit of money.
Let me ask you this, though. How premeditated was this, you think? Do you think these guys are sitting next to each other, tweeting at each other? Because to me, when I read it and I looked at the back and forth, I'm thinking, it feels like they're sitting next to each other. Right? And they're like, because he's like, yeah, fam, go out there and get that speed record. And it's like, yeah, I'm going to.
I didn't really think about that until you said it, but once you do say it, a couple things do quickly come to mind. Can I see the exchange one more time? Because there are a couple things that you see here. Adidas throwing the new speed hashtag. Dante Jackson does come back with the hashtag 3Stripe Life. Now, that could be just because he likes Adidas that much. I mean, Michael, what do you think about that? Michael's a young guy. Does he just like Adidas enough to use 3Stripe Life, or is that a sanctioned hashtag So Michael's kind of with you that this is maybe like a little bit of a cynical deal here. So Michael, you think that's a like a sponsored deal?
Premeditated. I think there's no question about it in my mind.
It still kind of comes
No,
across.
it's great. It's premeditated, but it's great marketing by both of them.
Yeah.
Because I think you get your name out there if you're Dante Jackson and say, I want everybody to know I'm going for it. And of course, Adidas is going to jump on the back of it and say, we'd love to sponsor the fastest guy to ever come through the combine.
We got all kinds of LSU folks that were with us. Jake Higginbotham and Shannon Burgess and Cliff Nelson. Is Dante fast enough to do this? Of course, Cliff Nelson he's going to run.
Tyler Mann thinks he's going to do it. The record's about to be broken. I think the record's
Cliff Nelson's going to say he's going to
4.22.
run 3 flat.
I just put on to Cliff Nelson on the Facebook side. I said, I bet you a gallon of bourbon, Cliff, he doesn't break 4.25.
Look at you.
Yeah, a gallon of bourbon, Cliff. I know Cliff loves those gallons of bourbon right there.
All right, so we'll follow that story, see how it goes. Item number 9 here on our SEC Country Live First and 10 list. And believe it or not, do it in Dog Nation Daily this morning on the video side of things. We actually take comments on there, much the same way we do here on Facebook and YouTube. And I got into a big thing with a bunch of Georgia fans on this next story. And it kind of unfolded in a way that you might not think. So we talked about Dan Mullen being at the Tampa Yacht Club, taking questions from fans.
Tampa Yacht Club.
That's where he was.
Yeah,
you saw that.
I wondered what that was, like a swimming pool, like a lap pool.
That's I think that's like the Gulf of Mexico or something.
Yeah, swanky.
Yeah, swanky place. The sort of high. I think they call those bull
Surely
gators.
that's Tampa Bay behind him, right? I mean, is it the Gulf of Mexico? You think right there on the?
Well, Bay, Gulf, Mexico. What am I? Some sort of like oceanographist or whatever? Oceanologist.
There's a bay out there.
I don't know the difference. So whatever it is, nonetheless, he gets a question about the uniforms that Florida's going to wear this upcoming season. Someone was there to kind of caption on Twitter. Dan Thompson is the reporter here. The question is, we're going to wear white pants, blue jerseys, orange helmets at home. Please. Those green things are horrible. This is a fan. Then Dan Mullen comes back with, want to know what every recruit said their favorite uniform was? The green ones. We're going to have a black jersey combination at some point. This is Dan Mullen on what Florida's going to wear here. I'm calling BS on this entire thing.
Me
now,
too.
I want people to hear what I'm saying here. There are two things going on. Yes, I am an old guy that likes traditional uniforms. But the real argument I'm making is no recruit is ever going to choose Florida because of these green uniforms. If Mullen believes that, then Florida fans ought to be nervous because recruits may say they like the uniforms, but recruits along the way say a lot of stuff that turns out not to be true. This is an example of that.
No, I couldn't agree with you more. And to me, I would love for Dan Mullen to go back to the signing class he just had and said, how many of y'all signed here because of the green uniforms? To me, it's such a loaded ploy, and it's kind of starting to jump the shark for me because it's like coaches keep coming out and saying this, and it's a recruiting tactic, and it's one of these things where it's an apparel kind of conversation. I have yet to see one recruit be like, well, you know what, those uniforms, unless it's like at a place like Oregon or Maryland. That's the only thing I can see. Other than that, if you're at a place like Florida, those uniforms are hideous. I don't know why you'd ever go back to them if you're down.
Teresa Stewart says, ugliest uniforms I've ever seen. Now, I will admit that there is a disconnect. We talked about Michael a moment ago, our producer. We've kind of joked about this before. Young people like this kind of stuff. It's the same way with, I can't even get my shoe up here, but I wear like dad tennis shoes, just like basic white tennis shoes. I don't like these, like these newfangled shoes that got all the colors. I can't stand these things. And I wear just like basic white tennis shoes. I like sort of basic uniforms. Young people don't really like that. I totally acknowledge that part of it. I'm with Teresa on that. She and I are very much on the same page. But when it comes to, is this what recruits do? I love what a Georgia fan said about this today. This is gimmick recruiting. And that's not a shot at Florida. But the notion that, hey, we're going to wear these swamp uniforms, we're going to get recruits. No, you're not. That's like saying, hey, my retirement plan is the lottery. I mean, that's a strategy. It's just not a very good one, not a very effective one over the long term. Oh.
I'm
what are you
losing
laughing at?
The YouTube people on the YouTube page are commenting on how fast they think you can run the 40.
Man, let me tell you
98 Sports Talk gives you a 12.4, and other people are saying you can use those white tennis shoes to run the 40.
There are some athletic endeavors that I'm not terrible at. If you want to stand there and shoot free throws where your feet can be firmly planted on the floor,
right?
Honestly, I'm pretty good at shooting free throws. If we go to an arcade, pop a shot, I'll beat the brains out of anybody who's watching the show right now when it comes to pop a shot, things like that. But when it comes to running, I'm actually slower than you even think I am. Whatever you think I am, I'm actually even slower than that. Sometimes it amazes me how slow I am.
Have you seen the video of Brandon Walker doing the 40-yard?
Brandon Walker hosts the SEC Country Mississippi State podcast. He had a race with one of our SEC Country colleagues of the day. I would have finished I would have finished well in the back of the pack.
Yeah, I was actually impressed with Brandon Walker.
And you know, so I'm even slower than you think I am when it comes to stuff
and
like
Glenn
that.
Bocott comes on here in the comment section and says we're haters. I guess Glenn being a guy, he loves any uniform the Gators are wearing, and that's fine. I would be the same way. Any uniform that Alabama put on, I'm still going to cheer for Alabama the same way.
Yeah.
The question is this a recruiting tactic?
Right.
And I just don't believe that it's really, really getting the attention of that many recruits, especially a uniform that I understand if you're offended, Florida fans. That's an ugly uniform by everybody, by every other fan base in the country. That's the ugly
Mike just says it's objectively true. That thing's ugly.
It's just terrible.
It was a YouTube commenter that said that?
No, it's on Facebook.
Okay, so what I'd say back that is, in this particular issue, you're probably right. Me, the Georgia guy, Mike, the former Alabama player, our opinion on this doesn't matter. If recruits like it, that matters more. But it seems like a majority of Florida fans don't even like these things.
No, yeah, that's most of the feedback we've gotten from Florida fans is. And listen, label us as haters all you want to. I don't wear a Gator hater shirt. BA owns a few of them. But that's just my opinion of saying.
Sold several hundred.
Yeah, that's my opinion of saying, I've been a recruit before. I don't think that has anything to do with it. I really don't. Maybe it's cool to like show up. But listen, when the recruits showed up to Florida and Dan Mullen was down there and they're taking the photography thing and taking pictures of these guys, they didn't put them in the green and black uniforms. They put them in the all-white Gator uniforms and had them hold the ball. I think that tells you a lot about what it is recruiting-wise.
I said I was not a bad jump shooter. Enrique Murillo says, could I beat Lonzo Ball in a free throw competition? Bow Wow did hitting those threes yesterday. I tell you this, not to make a basketball topic out of this, my form on a jump shot's much better than Lonzo Ball's.
This is terrible. This is terrible. I don't know exactly what it's supposed to look like, but it's not supposed to look like that.
All right, let me do some real football here. Item number 10 on our SEC Country Live First and 10 list. We mentioned that Auburn starting spring practice tomorrow, and one of the guys that's going to be in the spotlight during Auburn spring practice, I believe, is Marcavius Big Cat Bryant, who was one of the real true centerpiece members of Auburn's 2017 class, and his former high school coach at Crisp County in Cordele, Georgia, is Shelton Felton. Felton is now the linebackers coach at Chattanooga. He's moving on to the college ranks, but SEC Country caught up with him to get some thoughts on Bryant moving into his second year at Auburn. And, well, Shelton Felton's predicting big things here. According to Felton, the word on Marcavius Bryant is the goal is to be the number one guy. The goal is to go into spring and leave no doubts. Get ready mentally, physically, learn the playbook in and out, and be in the best shape possible. So he says that Marcavius Big Cat Bryant wants to be the number one guy for Auburn this upcoming season, and I think that's possible. And we talk about Auburn needing to replace some of its pass rush. Obviously, Jeff Holland is gone. They still bring back a lot of their sacks from a year ago. In terms of a guy stepping up and playing well, I think that Marcavius Big Cat Bryant could really be one of those guys.
I think he's right there. I think that there's a couple of other names that have come up a ton this offseason already, in my opinion. TD Moultrie, I think a lot is expected of him, and Nick Coe's another one. I think both those guys get nicked up along the way last year. Marlon Davidson's also in the kind of similar conversation as far as defensive end go. But when you talk about guys rushing the passer, what was my biggest problem anyways last offseason? Boy, who's going to be that next Carl Lawson? I can't even count how many times I probably brought that up last offseason. Guess what? Jeff Holland comes out there and makes you forget about Carl Lawson in a couple of weeks. I mean, Jeff Holland was everything last week. He was unbelievable coming off the edge. The athleticism, the balance he showed, I thought was incredible. That's why he's headed to the NFL right now. Can they pull it off 2 years in a row? Can TD Moultrie come out or Nick Coe? I don't know if we're looking at, obviously I think Big Cat Bryant has a ton of, a huge future ahead of him. I think he's going to make it to the NFL. I think he's going to do great things. But if I'm talking about those three guys, I don't think Big Cat Bryant is the one in my sights. I think I look at a guy like TD Moultrie. I've heard coaches talk about him. I've heard, I've heard Gus go out and talk about him. I think he's the next big things in terms of edge rusher. I think he's going to have a great year.
I think my takeaway from what you said there, and I think you bring up some really interesting points, but I like the idea of having a number of bodies. I like the idea of being able to have a lot of guys in that discussion, and certainly that's what Auburn gets when it comes to Big Cat Bryant. Okay, here on SEC Country Live, we're always looking to close out the show the same way. We're always on the search for champions of life, and today it comes from the ranks of college athletics and basketball. The folks who sit the bench for the Nebraska basketball team have taken to calling themselves the bench mob, and they've gotten a lot of attention because of some of their hijinks during the game. Take a look at some of the stuff that they've done here.
Stuff in the left hand doing all this.
Oh, it's over, ladies and gentlemen.
Slithering. Watch out, watch out, watch out, watch out.
That's the RKO, by the way. That's Randy
not the
Orton's.
Stone Cold Stunner?
No, it's similar.
Yeah.
That's Randy Orton's finisher in professional wrestling. You see a little bit of dancing there. We were talking about this before the show. This is not completely original. The Monmouth basketball team had a bench that was doing all this kind of stuff a lot.
They had the canoe going at one point.
If I'm a coach, I don't know that I love this. I mean, even if it's guys that don't really play very much, something about this doesn't really sit right with me, but I sort of feel like a curmudgeon for saying that.
No, I agree with you. I think this is a lot easier to do in like baseball where you're all in the dugout. But when you're like you're at a basketball game, I feel like a basketball team, they're like sitting on the court. You know, they got one leg out there. I do find it like they come under a microscope a little bit more in basketball.
I feel like it's almost a little bit too attention-seeking, right?
Yeah, I mean, to me, if you're focused on what you're going to do for celebration, why are you not focused on getting on the court? But you know, I don't play basketball, and it's different than anything I've ever been a part of.
Kevin Blackman says that's John Cena. That is not John Cena. That is Randy Orton's RKO.
What do you think?
I mean, listen, I may not know a lot, but I know my professional wrestling. That's the move you saw there was the Randy Orton RKO.
Are you a Georgia fan that would have to hate Roman Reigns? Isn't Roman Reigns a Georgia Tech guy? You know Roman Reigns?
Yeah, but most wrestling fans hate Roman Reigns anyway.
Okay,
I don't know. Reigns did go to Georgia Tech. That's one of the top WWE wrestlers. Obviously, I've got the Georgia gear on. Most wrestling fans don't like Roman Reigns.
You know, Roman Reigns also went to Escambia High School, which is where Jacob Copeland signed out of.
There you go. It all comes full circle. That's Mike Johnson. I'm Brandon Adams. Thanks for being here with us on SEC Country Live today. If you missed a portion of the show, I don't know why you would want to hear it again, but you can go back and listen to the podcast over on iTunes. You can also share the show with your friends on Facebook. And we found out there is a share button on YouTube. Somebody told us. Just click that button, and who knows where it goes. But you can share it with somebody.
Doing it right now.
Yeah, would love to see you tomorrow afternoon at 3 p.m. Eastern Time for another episode of SEC Country Live. Y'all have a great day.